Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mahalet Getacho, and I'm the Managing Director of Corporate Racial Equity at PolicyLink. I'm joined today by several of my partners and colleagues at PolicyLink, Just Capital, and FSG. On behalf of the Corporate Racial Equity Alliance team, we are thrilled to welcome you to the release of the Draft Business Standards for 21st Century Leadership. Informed by extensive research and consultations with hundreds of stakeholders, these groundbreaking standards provide businesses with a clear roadmap to advance equity and inclusion, to combat discrimination, and to embody the best of socially responsible business. This is a huge milestone in our work, and we're so excited to be able to share the draft standards with you all today. Now, we could not have gotten here without the support of our colleagues, partners, and funders. There is a big team with us, and we won't get to introduce everybody today, but we do want to thank all of you who have supported and helped shape our work today. During today's webinar, we will provide an update on our work and an overview of the draft standards. We'll also share how you can lend your voice, insight, and experience to the standards through our public comment period, which launches today. That's right, these standards are not final yet. We are sharing them with you all early because we know that your voice and expertise and experience can help strengthen them. Now, before we get started, I'd like to share some housekeeping notes with you. First, we're very fortunate today to be joined by Lore Espinoza, who is providing Spanish language interpretation in a separate channel in a moment. Everyone who wants to access that will need to select their language for this webinar, either English or Spanish. Right now, I'd like to ask Lori to come on and share those instructions in Spanish.
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Lore Espinosa y estaré el día de hoy con interpretación en español. Para aquellos de ustedes que quieran acceder al canal en español, por favor encuentren el mapa mundi en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y seleccionen español. Esta opción la van a tener en los próximos minutos cuando activemos la interpretación. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Mahalet.
Thank you, Lori. Now we're going to start interpretation. So if you are going to access this webinar in English, you have to also press the globe at the bottom of the Zoom window and select English. I'll say that again. You'll see a globe at the bottom of the screen. Select English when you click the globe if you want to listen to this in English, or select Spanish if you want to listen to Lori's translation. If you're joining from a phone, press the 3 dots at the bottom right of your screen and then select Spanish. I'm going to pause for just a moment to ensure everyone is in the right place, English or Spanish, and then we'll get going. All right, we're also very grateful to be joined by Vernice Williams and Joshua Lane, who will be providing American Sign Language interpretation. And live captioning is being provided by Audrey Spinka. To access it, click the closed caption button on the bottom of your screen. Thank you so much, Lori, Vernice, Joshua, and Audrey. Now, please note that the chat channel is closed for attendees, but we invite you to submit your questions to us through the Q&A function at any time throughout the webinar. Attendees will not be able to see each other's questions about today's content, and we will not name who submits questions just to maintain the anonymity of those who submit questions. If you happen to have a question to troubleshoot a technical issue, we may respond to you directly in the Q&A section. Now, we have a lot to share today, so if we don't get to Q&A or to all the questions that come in, we absolutely will aim to answer as many as we can in our frequently asked questions, which will be updated and posted on our website in the next few days and continually updated over the next few weeks. Finally, I want to note we're recording this webinar, and we'll share the recording and slides with all registrants via email after the event, and the recording will also be available on our website. Now, given the number of attendees joining us today, our capacity to provide tech support is limited. So if you experience any tech issues while you're in the Zoom platform, please consider hopping out of the meeting and rejoining us. If that does not solve your issue, we hope you'll be able to at least view and listen to the recording after the event, which again will be on our website. And now I'm thrilled to be able to call into the room President and CEO of PolicyLink, Michael McAfee, for some opening comments.
Thank you, Marlette. And thank you all for joining us today. This is an exciting opportunity for us. You know, in our equity manifesto, the first sentence says, it begins by joining. And what we recognize at PolicyLink is the fact that if we're going to create a just and fair society, one where all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential, business must be front and center in that work. You know, business has a couple of superpowers. One of them is that it knows how to bend the legal and regulatory frame of this nation to its will. The other is that it has outsized influence on this economy. And so when we think about the work of equity, it can't be achieved without partnering with business. Many of the successes that we've had societally and from an economic standpoint has been a result of the innovations in the business sector. And so we thank you for joining us today. We thank you for the work that you've done over the years to help perfect our democracy and our economy. And today we're asking you to stand firm and to continue that work. You know, the standards that FSG, Just Capital, and PolicyLink have developed in partnership with so many in the field, these are transcendent standards. They don't know a political season. They don't know a political party. They don't know polarization. What they do know is that there are 100 million people, 1 in 3 people, who are economically insecure in this nation. And we have a birthright to continue to try to perfect our democracy and our economy while we're here. Now, even after we're gone, long gone, our democracy and our economy will be imperfect. But it doesn't mean that we can't have a founder's orientation to this nation and to our economy, and that we can be committed to creating that just and fair society, which is the aspiration of equity. You know, in this moment, folks will tell you don't use the word equity or inclusion or belonging or diversity. That's a choice that you'll have to make for yourself. One of the things that I know and I'm excited about in regards to these standards is that they're evergreen. They actually rise even above that language. They focus on the aspiration, the outcome of what we're trying to achieve in this nation. And I ask that as you begin to explore the standards and consider whether you'll take them up, that you think about the importance of achieving the aspiration and the outcome. You know, there are moments in an evolution of a society where some work is just generational and it will be waiting for us, whether it's today or tomorrow or 100 years. And we believe the work of perfecting this economy is generational work that is going to be waiting for us, whether we take it up today or tomorrow. But given that there are 100 million folks who need that today, we think that this is the time to take up that work, to take up the mantle of perfecting this economy so that 100 million can move on into the middle class and beyond. That sounds grand, but it is possible. We've seen so much progress over the last several years. Much of that has been led by business. And in this moment, we want to stand with business. We want to provide you a roadmap to continue to do your best work, a roadmap that will be evergreen, a roadmap that you can be confident doesn't get you mired into the politics of today or the division of today, but allows you to be an institution that is a quality institution, an institution that you can be proud of, situated in this economy, making it better for everyone. That's what these standards are about. You know, when we talk about equity at PolicyLink, and when you think about that definition, the operative word in that definition is all. We're asking you to remember these standards are for everyone, no matter the color of your skin, your sexual identity, your gender, etc. This economy must work for everyone. That's the aspiration of equity, living into the all. And these standards provide you a powerful roadmap for doing that. And so my invitation to you is to join us in the work of perfecting our economy, to join us in the work of partnering with each other, holding each other in this tough work and helping each other get better. I thank you right now. I thank you because I remain hopeful because of your leadership. I remain hopeful because if you take up these standards, you will be a best-in-class organization, and you'll stay there if you're already there. Lastly, I want to thank my colleagues, Just Capital and FSG. You know, to achieve the work that we want to achieve in this nation, it requires powerful partners. Partners who will hold you accountable, partners that are going to love you and be with you in the good times and the bad. And that's who we have in these two partners, FSG and Just Capital. We're proud to join today to share these standards. When this webinar is over, to join you in holding you as you begin to implement these standards. And I invite you to give yourself a little grace. It's a tough time. There are a lot of pressures on your firm, and we truly do understand that. And we know that if we're going to have a stable economy, you've got to have a stable societal environment. These standards provide that blueprint to help you improve your bottom line and have balance with people, planet, and profit. It's an honor to be with you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Francis.
Thank you, Michael, and hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Francis Finland, Director of Corporate Action and Research at the nonprofit Just Capital. Our mission at Just Capital is to build an economy that works for all Americans by helping companies improve how they serve all their stakeholders, workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. Since 2015, we've surveyed more than 189,000 Americans about what they believe business leaders should prioritize and what constitutes just corporate practices. Time and time again, we hear a similar message from the American people, that a majority of them want companies to prioritize workers and wages, and that they believe it's important for companies to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our most recent report on Americans' views on business was fielded in June and July of last year. Across ideologies, we saw the highest alignment among respondents that CEOs should take a stand on issues of equity, gender equity, income inequality, advancing racial equity, as well as ethical use of AI and upholding and protecting voting rights for all Americans. In fact, 79% of Americans said that they believe it is important to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. Meanwhile, only about half of Americans, or 52%, believe that companies are doing somewhat or very well on these issues. Just Capital's research has also found that a broad consensus of Americans across varying demographics and political ideologies believe that companies should prioritize workers as their top stakeholder and prioritize paying a fair living wage as their #1 issue. However, additional research published this spring by Just and business intelligence firm Revelio Labs found that many American workers are still struggling to make ends meet. More than 36% of US-based Russell 1000 workers do not make a family-sustaining wage. That's more than 6 million people. And more specifically, 19% of Russell 1000 workers do not earn enough to meet their own basic needs, or a living wage for one full-time employee without dependents. This research demonstrates that there is room for improvement, but that improvement is achievable, in part, with the commitment of corporate leaders and the clarity offered in the Alliance's standards. Now I'll turn it back to Mahalet to introduce the standards.
Thank you so much, Kelly Francis and Michael, for that opening. So for the rest of our time, we're going to do a very brief overview of the Alliance and why these standards are important now. And then we're going to spend a lot of time introducing the standards and then some time about the road ahead what's coming next after this public comment period, and then most important, how all of you can lend your voice and your expertise to helping us continue to refine and strengthen these draft standards. Let's go to the next slide. As Michael mentioned, our three organizations have been working together on this initiative for over 3 years now, and our partnership brings together decades of collective experience in racial and economic equity, guiding business leaders on social change and data-driven tools and insights. Along with us are many other partners and experts as well. Let's go to the next slide. Our mission, as you've heard, is to develop corporate performance standards, really focused on 360 degrees of business impact and influence across our society, from workers to communities to our democracy. And we're building these standards. We've built them on the foundation of the CEO Blueprint for Racial Equity. And the goal is that we establish a common language and framework for enterprise-wide action that advances inclusion and equity, combats discrimination, and supports businesses in adopting socially responsible practices across the enterprise. Let's go to the next slide. Equity is our guiding ethos, as you heard from Michael, and at the heart of what this term means is the all. This work and the standards that everyone will dive into and hopefully give us great feedback on, it is meant to leave no one behind. It is meant to leave no one behind. We started this effort focused on racial and economic equity, and what we found, as you'll see on the next slide, in centering our focus on the nearly 100 million people in America that experience economic insecurity, is that the 100 million, just like everybody else in our society, we have multiple identities. And in addition to racial and economic equity, we also have to think about other dimensions of exclusion and marginalization. And that's also important in order to have an intersectional focus on our work. Let's go to the next slide. And we can go forward one more. Thank you. So the standards aim to do a number of things. Absolutely to advance and improve data practices, establish a clear roadmap for enterprise-wide action, and the most important is that we want to help establish new business norms for equity, inclusion, and social responsibility in the very DNA of everyday business. Let's go to the next slide. We've been on this journey for over 3 years now. We've released an exposure draft which captured the conceptual framework and methodology of this work. We've hosted public comment periods, and we've conducted pilots with companies, and you'll hear a little bit about both in a bit. Let's go to the next slide. Since the last public comment period, there have been some updates to our work. And so at a very high level, we'll share a few of these and invite everybody to dive into the report that's just released today and learn more about what's changed over the past few years and what hasn't changed at all. At a high level, the corporate levers of change that we released 2 years ago, all the substance is still there, and we've streamlined where there's been redundancies. We're now down to 14 standards. The 10 equity outcomes that anchor this work, we've refined them over the past 2 years based on stakeholder feedback. And the standards are still a universal set of standards for US businesses, but they are also very well suited, especially well suited for large US businesses. And within the standards, we have guidance here and there for smaller companies, for public versus private companies. And over time, we will continue to refine and tailor the standards. As you heard from Michael, we've expanded our scope, and at the same time, we're staying true to our design. Here's what I mean by that. When we released the standards, a few draft standards in 2022, for example, our living wage standard, the standard was that 100% of workers, regardless of what kind of worker, whether you're a contingent worker or a full-time worker or part-time worker, 100% of workers ought to be earning a living wage. And that performance target that we shared with the public at that time was deeply influenced by our research and findings that people of color and people living in economic insecurity experience predominantly the challenges of economic insecurity. And so that living wage standard was influenced by our research and focus on exclusion and groups that are historically marginalized, but it is broadly applicable to all workers. In that way, our standards are staying true to our design. We are focused on the fundamentals of breaking down barriers to exclusion, and the performance targets are broadly applicable to everybody. Let's go to the next slide. So why standards? Why now? You've heard a little bit already from Kelly Francis and Michael, so we'll move through this part quickly. Let's go to the next slide. As everyone will see in the report, there are very important reasons why this moment is more important than ever. What I'll focus on here is that there still is a distinct gap in the standards landscape. There are a lot of really powerful frameworks, performance standards, disclosure frameworks, and yet there is still a gap. Our work is deeply anchored in racial and economic equity, and it is incredibly comprehensive. And we don't see other tools out there as comprehensive. There are a lot of disclosure frameworks, but comprehensive performance agendas, those are still needed. And so we know these standards are meeting a very important gap in the space, and we're excited that everyone will get to see them now. And of course, as you heard from Kelly Francis, the value proposition is stronger than ever. Let's keep going. Next slide. There are a number of reasons for businesses to take on these standards, and we won't stay here long, but think about these 7 top reasons here. The benefits, of course, if you want to attract top talent, increase your brand value, make a holistic positive impact. These standards are for you. On the risk mitigation side, if you want to mitigate enterprise risk, reduce reputational risk, and ensure that you're staying compliant with all current rules and regulations, these standards are for you too. So wherever you find the most resonance, know that these standards we aim will support your needs. Let's go to the next slide. And so let's get into the standards without any further delay. Let's go to the next slide. The standards, as you've heard, influenced by our comprehensive research over the past several years, broad stakeholder feedback, and a lot of testing with companies. You're going to hear more about that. And at the heart of the standards, it's focused on these fundamental things here: improving the sustainability performance of U.S. businesses related to social issues. So that means combating, eliminating bias and discrimination, advancing equity and inclusion, and ensuring equal opportunities for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, socioeconomic status, and any other social category and characteristic. Let's go to the next slide for the full scope of the standards. As you see here, we have our narrative frame of within the company, within the community, and across society. This is how the standards are organized. First, it's about building a strong foundation, then about protecting the value creation of the company, the value creation engine, and of course, being a good neighbor and being an engaged corporate citizen. Let's go to the next slide. You're going to hear more from my colleagues in a bit about each and every standard, but before we go there, we want you to hold a few things close. First, there are a lot of performance targets that we've developed, but no single performance target should be seen as a standalone solution or a quick fix. Think of this package of performance targets and the standards as a recipe for success. They relate to each other, they are mutually reinforcing. Also, as you heard from Michael, we believe in the power of business and the power of the American economy, and we know that it can work better. And these standards aim to strike a better balance, the right balance between business and, of course, meeting the interests of all people and the needs of our planet. And while the standards are numbered, don't think of this work as linear. We number the standards just for ease of reference, but adopting the standards is not a linear process. So we'll share more about what that looks like. And finally, hold close that performance is at the heart of these standards. This is not first and foremost a disclosure framework, it's a performance agenda. And each standard provides goals and robust guidance to support making progress over time. And now I'm excited to turn it over to Ashley Marchand-Orme of Just Capital for a detailed dive.
Thank you, Mahalet. Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Marchand-Orme, the Director of Equity and Stakeholder Leadership at Just Capital. I'm now pleased to share with you a preview of the first 8 draft standards, beginning with the first 4, which are focused on corporate governance, internal infrastructure, leadership and board education, and workforce culture. We'll linger a bit on draft standard 4 so that I can offer a deeper sense of some of the data and research that undergird the standards through what we're calling data supplements. I want to again reiterate that what we're sharing in today's webinar and in the report published today is not the final set of standards. These are still in draft form, and we will continue to hone them through our research efforts and the input of stakeholders like you. Let's take a look at the standards content. Next slide, please. The first draft standard focuses on integrating equity, inclusion, and social responsibility within corporate governance and ensuring senior leaders are clear-eyed about their oversight and management roles so the company can effectively make progress over time. Embodying the best of socially responsible business is long-term work. To ensure the business is set up for success, having a strong foundation in governance and alignment among leadership is vital. This standard includes targets on integrating equity, inclusion, and social responsibility into foundational corporate governance documents. It also includes information on the relevant topics that should be integrated into annual discussions of the full board and each standing committee. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 2 focuses on establishing and maintaining the internal infrastructure necessary to advance equity and inclusion and adopt socially responsible business practices across the enterprise. This standard aims to ensure that there are sufficient resources to sustain the work, that there is alignment around this work internally, and that course correction can occur with greater agility. Standard 2 includes targets on appropriate capital allocation and human resources. It also includes targets around approaching data analytics, due diligence, and assessment practices, from ongoing human rights due diligence to conducting an accessibility assessment and periodically conducting civil rights audits. You'll see in the performance target on civil rights audits a note about forthcoming guidelines related to this topic, including engaging a qualified independent auditor carrying out the audit, sharing the audit results with stakeholders, and more. You'll hear more about this over the summer from PolicyLink and other partners. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 3 focuses on supporting senior leaders and board members in improving their understanding and fluency in social responsibility to more effectively manage and oversee the company's impacts on workers, customers, communities, and society more broadly. Doing this effectively can position the business for greater success in attracting and retaining top talent from all backgrounds, and ultimately delivering greater value to corporate stakeholders. The targets here focus on investing time and resources into essential skill building, putting acquired knowledge into practice, and ensuring leaders are achieving positive results over time. Standard 3 also calls for senior leaders to better understand the experiences of non-managerial workers, especially frontline workers. This can be achieved by practices like shadowing these workers, for example. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 4 focuses on building an organizational culture where the workforce feels safe, meaningfully heard, and able to give their best. This is vital to business success, and it also is critical to retain a diverse workforce. The performance targets for this standard focus on adopting essential policies and practices that help foster a culture of inclusion and belonging, plus key measures that help illuminate whether the company is on the right track. Standard 4 includes targets on establishing a two-way anonymous reporting and communication channel, measuring whether workers feel safe and feel a strong sense of inclusion and belonging. And it also focuses on tracking attrition rates across demographic groups and taking concrete action as issues arise. We also want to emphasize here that this is not the full picture of workplace culture, of course. Other key aspects of workplace culture are reflected in other standards like Standard 1 on leadership and accountability, Standard 2 on accessible spaces and aligned teams, Standard 3 on leadership skills, Standards 5 and 6 on talent management and job quality, and Standard 12 on communications. Next slide, please. As promised earlier, we're going to pause for a moment here on draft Standard 4. You'll soon hear how each standard contains guidance and numerous resources to get started on the road toward adoption. And along with sharing resources within each standard, we are also developing data supplements to accompany key standards, namely those related to the workforce, job quality, products and services, the value chain, and community impact. The data supplements will help understand the barriers to equal opportunities faced by historically underrepresented and marginalized groups. These supplements will also help clarify the significant opportunities companies have to make lasting positive impacts on all corporate stakeholders. As a preview of what's coming with today's release, we're including a draft data supplement for Standard 4 that shares data and research on the workplace experiences of people of color, LGBTQ+ people, people living with disabilities, women, and older workers. This initial draft data supplement is based on a snapshot in time and is not intended to be exhaustive. That said, we hope it helps to broadly identify the benefits of adopting Standard 4 for the company and society, to help make the case for adoption and why Standard 4 is important, and to provide a baseline understanding of the current state of performance and opportunities companies may have for improvement. In the coming months and on the launch of the final standards, we'll release additional data supplements for other standards, including for standards 5 through 8, which we'll dive into next. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 5 calls for ensuring equal opportunities for all by eliminating bias and discrimination in recruitment, hiring, development, and retention practices at all levels of the company. This standard also covers board recruitment, appointment, and evaluation practices. The standard's about ensuring that everyone has a fair shot in their careers, regardless of their background. With the US set to become a majority of people of color nation by 2045, ensuring everyone has a fair shot in employment, advancement, and leadership opportunities is a strategic imperative for business relevance and competitiveness. And as you heard from Mahalet, we are acutely aware of the current landscape around DEI and want to reiterate that the standards do not call for and should not be read as recommending or requiring businesses to make hiring or other employment decisions based on any protected status or characteristic in violation of any law. The research is unequivocal that systemic bias and discrimination impede equal employment opportunities for people of color, women, and other historically underrepresented groups. Similarly, in boardrooms across the US, people of color, women, and other historically marginalized groups are dramatically underrepresented. While some progress has been made, there is still significant room for improvement. This standard will support companies in ensuring that talent recruitment and management proactively mitigate bias and discrimination and help the company succeed in attracting and retaining top talent from all backgrounds. The targets here include proactive steps to cast a wide net in talent recruitment, monitoring retention and turnover rates, and setting up inclusive and fair talent management systems that promote career development and well-being for all workers. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 6 focuses on providing high-quality jobs at all levels of the company. This is one of the most powerful levers companies have to positively impact workers and communities. Ensuring the jobs that the company offers at all levels of the organization enable workers to thrive and build a future is vital for sustainability, for business relevance and competitiveness. The targets in the standard focus on ensuring all workers are earning living wages, on offering essential benefits and fair rewards to all workers, ensuring total compensation practices for executives are socially responsible, and conducting annual pay equity reviews. This standard also includes targets related to amplifying worker voice, which is another key component of a high-quality job. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 7 focuses on ensuring the company's products and services are equitable, inclusive, and socially responsible from the earliest stages of development through the entire life cycle of products and services. The targets here support the company in aligning its aspirations for beneficial products and services with its actual impacts on customers, end users, and communities. This includes targets on integrating equity, inclusion, and social responsibility in business strategy, equipping relevant teams to successfully advance such priorities, and treating customers and end users with dignity and respect at all stages, especially when things go wrong. Like many of the other targets, the targets here are not meant to be accomplished in 1 month or 1 quarter or even 1 year, but we provide guidance on how to make steady progress over time. Next slide, please. Draft Standard 8 focuses on practices that promote greater economic inclusion in the company's value chain and integrate social responsibility and how the company works with suppliers. These targets focus on adopting essential policies and practices to foster a diverse and socially responsible value chain, plus key measures that will help illuminate whether the company's on the right track, from tracking procurement spend as well as value chain controversies, and taking concrete action whenever issues arise. Like the other standards, this standard does not call for and should not be read as recommending or requiring businesses to make procurement decisions based on any protected status or characteristic in violation of any law. Now, we're pleased to release this full set of 8 draft standards today. And you'll hear more soon about how you can lend your insight and expertise to continue shaping these draft standards. So now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague at FSG, Kimberly Shin. Over to you, Kim.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Shin, the Managing Director of Talent Rewired at FSG. And I'm excited to give you a preview of Draft Standards 9 through 14, focused on community and societal impact, and share more about how to navigate each standard. And for the sake of time, I'm going to stay at a pretty high level. So let's start with Draft Standards 9 to 11, which focus on communities and being a good neighbor. Draft Standard 9 focuses on how companies can demonstrate responsible stewardship of our natural environment and climate. The targets aim to support businesses in ensuring that they are operating sustainably. This includes prioritizing their own role in addressing our climate emergency and restoring nature. Draft Standard 10 focuses on supporting the health and well-being of the communities that are affected by or within the company's operational footprint, including by engaging equitably with local communities and ensuring public incentive companies enjoy also have tangible benefits for communities. Draft Standard 11 focuses on corporate philanthropy. And while the standard does not require such activity, it provides important guardrails if companies do engage in philanthropy. This includes combating bias in philanthropic giving, proactively investing in efforts that tackle inequality, and adopting equitable giving practices from the processes implemented to the ways in which philanthropic teams engage with grantees. Let's go to the next slide. Draft Standards 12 to 14 focus on broader societal impact and being an engaged corporate citizen. Draft Standards 12 focuses on activating the power of communications in a number of ways, including ensuring external communications reflect and consider the diversity of society and disrupt harmful stereotypes. It also focuses on taking concrete action to ensure all communications related to the company's work in these areas are authentic. Draft Standard 13 focuses on responsible civic and political engagement. Specifically, the targets relate to having formal policies in place consistent with the company's values and goals, and under which all political activity, if any, is undertaken. This standard also includes targets on proactively protecting the stability and health of our democracy. Lastly, Draft Standard 14 focuses on ensuring investments, profit distributions, and tax and treasury practices are socially responsible and advance shared prosperity versus exacerbate wealth concentration. This includes targets on adopting equitable investment policies, analyzing tax mitigation approaches with a lens of basic fairness, and ensuring modes of profit distribution are socially responsible and avoid exacerbating inequality. We'll be releasing draft standards 9 through 14 for public feedback in September. And when they're released, we'll make an announcement in our newsletter and on our website. We may also include a brief recording on our website that outlines each of the new draft standards more deeply to support your review and feedback. Now, to give you a sense of how each standard is structured, let's take a closer look at one of them. Let's go to the next slide. This snapshot is the opening of Standard 3 on leadership and board skills related to advancing equity, inclusion, and social responsible business practices. For this public comment period, all the standards will be structured in this format. At the top, where we have item 1 labeled, is an outcome frame statement reflecting the level of performance required for the given topic. Item 2 on the snapshot is a basic requirement of a given standard, which is expressed as one or more activities and outputs of the company. Then item 3 is the full list of performance targets for the given standard, all of which must be achieved to meet the standard. Item 4 on the right is where we list the most closely associated equity outcomes, showing how achievement of the standard contributes to positive societal impact. We also map each standard to key global frameworks. That's item 5, and we plan to build out this mapping over time. The current mapping is just a start, and it isn't meant to be exhaustive. Each standard also includes a high-level summary of the business and societal value proposition, including the key data and the rationale for the associated performance targets. Let's go to the next slide. After the overview page, every standard includes a glossary of the key terms applicable to a given standard and the associated performance targets. Some terms are relevant across all the standards, are therefore repeated. After that comes each performance target, labeled as item 1 on the slide. The performance target is presented as an outcome frame statement reflecting the level of performance required in a given area to meet the overarching standard. And within each performance target, there's a requirement statement. That's item 2 on the slide. The requirement outlines the activities and outputs of the company needed to achieve the associated performance target. Then there's a metric to measure progress, which is item 3. And we use 2 types of metrics. 1, policy activity and practice screens, and 2, quantitative measures. In some cases, a performance target will have 2 metrics, such as adopting a policy and then measuring its efficacy. Items 4, 5, and 6 contain the rationale for the target, implementation tips, and guidelines on how to implement the standard. The guidelines support implementation and are the required steps to meet the performance target. They will also support verification upon the launch of the final standards. Let's go to the next slide. Sharing progress and achievement is critical. So under item 7 here, we indicate the ways companies can share progress with key stakeholders. This comprises several types of disclosure tailored to the stakeholder groups with whom it is most relevant to share progress and achievement, from internal disclosures for the board and/or the workforce to external disclosures integrated within the company's existing public reporting processes, such as an annual report or filing. We want to reiterate that these standards are designed as a performance agenda, not as a disclosure framework. That means there are only a subset of targets for which the public disclosure is indicated, and it's important to keep in mind that disclosure is not the first step. You'll hear more from Mahala on further implementation plans to support companies in determining their pathway to adopting the standards, including related to making meaningful disclosures over time. Let's go to the next slide. The last section of each performance target includes resources, example interim targets and metrics, and mapping to other frameworks. Item 8 on the slide lists the interim targets which we offer as potential starting and progression points when the company does not yet meet the related performance target. They're not intended to be prescriptive or exhaustive. Each company can and should consider its particular context in designing the right interim targets to continuously make progress toward achieving the performance targets. Item 9 lists the interim metrics, which we offer to support companies in measuring progress toward meeting the example interim targets. Some metrics may apply to more than one example interim target. And just like the interim targets, the interim metrics are examples and are not meant to be prescriptive. Item 10 is where we will include references to other standards and frameworks that address similar issues and or use similar indicators. Because the standards are not final yet, we are including the mapping at this stage. On the launch of the final standards, we'll complete this portion to further support companies in making connections across other standards and frameworks they may be using. In addition to this mapping, you'll hear more from Mahala about collaboration with other standard setters and plans for interoperability. And finally, item 11 here provides a short list of the key resources that contribute to our evidence base, as well as links to helpful tools and further guidance. On the launch of the final standards, a more comprehensive list of resources will be provided. We're continuing to build and test our work, so we absolutely welcome feedback on additional resources and tools that may be helpful. And in time, we plan to gather case studies of companies that have demonstrated strong performance with respect to a given target. And now, as we go to the next slide, I'd like to turn it back over to Mahalet to share how we envision this work coming to life.
Thank you so much, Kim. We're going to go to the next slide, the road ahead. So as you have heard, these standards are not final. The next 5 months, we're going to be focused on getting feedback from all of you. But ahead of us, you'll see in the report a summary about all of our upcoming plans, including a membership program for companies, as well as for all of the practitioners and experts that support companies in this kind of work. And then as well, a summary of the ways in which we're thinking about collaborating with other standard setters and benchmark organizations, including interoperability plans. And of course, we talk a little bit about the multiple stakeholder use cases behind these standards. Let's go to the next slide. This is just a snapshot of what's up ahead. I want to make sure we get to our public comment period participation opportunities, so we're going to keep it moving. Let's go to the next slide. And let's go one more forward. This is really important here. The standards are incredibly comprehensive. And we know that it may be overwhelming to review them because this is a performance agenda, not a disclosure framework. There's a lot in the standards. That said, we're thinking very deeply about how this work can be implemented across all companies. And so what you see here is some of our early thinking about developing archetypes of different kinds of companies so that any company can make progress across these standards. See here on the right, there are 7 archetypes that we are testing right now with companies and continuing to do research on. And for each of these archetypes, we will map out a pathway to adopting these standards over time. Let's go to the next slide. This is an example of how we're thinking about adoption. It moves in 4 waves where companies can think about what's easy to make progress on, all the way through to what can we make long-term goals around and make long-term investments accordingly. We'll share a lot more around this later this year as we continue our testing with companies around these adoption archetypes and pathways. Let's go to the next slide. The governance of the standards is also critically important at this stage of our work. And so you'll see in the report a section all about how we are planning this area of our work, governing of the standards, including the structure of our governance, decision-making, plans to establish an advisory committee soon, grievance mechanisms and dispute resolution. And we have also provided a very preliminary, incomplete draft of a governance charter that we invite feedback on. We are sharing this before it's complete in the spirit of transparency, and we're excited for your feedback around the governance of the standards. And now I'd like to go to the next slide. And just to share for a moment here, the governance, the development process, all of our work is anchored on these principles, and especially our governance. And we invite you all to learn more about these guiding principles, all the way from embedding accountability in our processes and also in the outcomes we're aiming for, to the anchor in this work that we are achieving equitable outcomes for members of the 100 million. All of these guiding principles guide the way we operate these standards, the way they will get updated over time, and how we partner with others. Let's go to the next slide. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kendra for the most important part, lending your voice to this effort. Kendra.
Thank you, Mahalet. Hello, everyone. I'm Kendra Berenson. I'm an Associate Director at FSG. I'm going to share a little bit about our broad stakeholder engagement efforts and how you can get involved in shaping these standards starting today. Next slide, please. From day one of our effort, we have centered stakeholder engagement from a broad array of people and organizations across the country. Gathering feedback throughout our development process is one way that we aim to ensure the standards we build meet the needs of all people who have a stake in how business operates today and in the future. Our approach to stakeholder engagement not only follows industry best practices, such as the ICL Code of Good Practice, but it also aims to build consensus and connection across the broad array of corporate stakeholders, especially those most impacted by our current economic system. So far, we have engaged over 500 people and numerous organizations across sectors in shaping the standards. This includes 2 public comment periods, 3 corporate pilots, and numerous other stakeholder consultations. We have heard and learned from a rich diversity of voices that have affirmed and strengthened our work. We don't have time right now to share the results of our last public comment period, but we want you to know that we heard your feedback and we have details in our report on the themes that we heard from you and how they are being integrated into the standards. So please check out our report for more information on that. We can advance a couple of slides. And we are also know that it's so important to test our work with businesses. So this has been a key part of our development process. In 2023, we completed 3 beta pilots with companies to further test and refine the standards. They spanned 3 to 9 weeks and involved 5 companies, primarily medium to large public and private companies in the retail, tech, and financial services industries. And now we are conducting a 6-month pilot with a cohort of 12 public and private companies across the retail, tech, healthcare, food and beverage, transportation, and financial services industries. The companies are medium to large, employing between 500 to over 100,000 people. And this is a key step in the finalization of the draft standards. We are immensely grateful to the hundreds of individuals who have taken the time to share their perspectives and expertise with us across all of our public comment periods, the corporate pilots, and other stakeholder consultations. The feedback we have received has strengthened our conceptual framework, deeply influenced the draft standards, and fortified our resolve to continue supporting businesses in advancing equity and inclusion, combating discrimination, and embodying the best of socially responsible business. And now it is your turn. Next slide, please. Today marks the kickoff of our 3rd public comment period, and we need your help to make sure the standards are comprehensive, focused on what matters, and impactful. While the draft standards we share today are the result of deep research and stakeholder consultation, they are, in fact, a draft. And so we invite all stakeholders to join us in continuing to shape the draft standards by participating in the public comment period from May 20th to October 31st, 2024. We hope to hear from anyone who has a stake in how businesses operate in our society. And this extends well beyond workers, business leaders, consumers, and investors. We also want to hear from young people, community leaders, standard setters, academics, public leaders, and you, all of you. We all have a stake, so we all should have a voice. And there are many ways to participate. First, you can download our latest report and draft standards 1 through 8 on the CRE Alliance website. You'll see the links in the chat. From there, you can provide feedback by joining a virtual roundtable discussion or completing an online survey. The link provided in the chat will take you to the survey and the schedule of roundtables. Bookmark that page, as that is where all standards development participation opportunities and updates will be posted. The survey is open right now, and the first roundtables will kick off in June. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the key areas we are asking for your feedback, and this information is all on the website and in the online survey. So please follow up there and you'll see all the details we want to hear from you. We are also pleased to offer equitable compensation for participation in our public comment period. So please see the eligibility criteria on the corporate standards page as well. We have received many excellent questions from you over the course of this hour, and we are going to share answers to many of them in our FAQ section on our website, and many of them are already answered in our report. So we encourage you to look there as well. And now it is my very great pleasure to pass it on to John Harper, the CEO of FSG, to close us out.
Thanks so much, Kendra. And thank you to all of our partners at PolicyLink and Just Capital, and to the incredible team leading this work. Hope over the course of this hour, you appreciated just a taste of the richness that's so deeply embedded within all of the standards. At FSG, we've been supporting corporate change makers for 20 plus years. I say corporate change makers because living into the best of socially responsible business isn't just about CSR teams. There are folks in HR, on DEI teams, and in many business units across firms seeking to advance this work. We at FSG lovingly call you the corporate change maker. As you're reading through the standards, I hope you'll take some time soon, and I hope really 3 things for you. 1, I hope you're affirmed by the actions that you're already taking, whether it's advancing fair chance hiring, embedding sort of trust-based philanthropy, or any of the other ideas that are captured in the standards. I hope that you feel affirmed that you are moving in the right direction and that you take a moment to celebrate that. 2, hope that you also get some guidance if you're feeling stuck. What might be the next step to move this work forward? We often like to think about how do you get to that best next step, realizing, as Mahalet said, there's a lot of ground that we're going to have to cover to implement all the standards. And finally, I hope that you have some clarity on how all of these pieces fit together. So often we can be challenged about, is it about DEI? Is it about sustainability? Is it about how we're treating our workers? Or is it about what's happening in community? We would say it's all of the above. And what the standards reflect is that broader vision for how to advance this work much more collectively. I invite you to reiterate Kendra's comment to come learn and co-create with us. With your input, the standards will offer businesses the actionable guidance needed to make meaningful change that endures whatever economic, social, or political changes might be on the horizon. As you sign off this call today, make a plan to read the report and the standards, take the survey, and we hope you'll join a roundtable. In doing so, you'll be joining an unprecedented effort to ensure everyone in our society can thrive. We look forward to receiving your input, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day today.